Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning. We'll go ahead and get started on this Friday's Tap In Live webinar. Everybody on the call is in mute, listen only mode. However, you can raise your hand. I can unmute you and we can do individual questions or for comments or clarity. And I highly encourage that. We've got a pretty small group on here today, so thank you all for joining. We're just going to go through just thinking end of the year. What are some of the things that we need to think about for the end of the year? Looking forward to, it's that time again. We're wrapping up another year. It's time to start planning for 2019. Now, for a business, planning is a little bit different than it is for, for our own personal resolutions, right? You wake up with a hangover on January 1st and you say, I'm going to quit drinking in 2019. That's a spot decision, and that's pretty easy to implement. But for a business, it requires a little bit more runway than that to get things in place. So we're just going to walk through some of the tools and some of the things we have available for that. We'll start with one of my favorite quotes from Zig Ziglar. How can you hit a target you cannot see? Here's another question. How can you hit a target you do not have? And we wander through business sometimes, without really the solid plan that we need to set ourselves up for success. And as businesses grow, we tend to do a lot better job of that. Initially, companies that are smaller usually don't really plan quite as much. So it's really a critical piece to success. Having a plan doesn't ensure that you're going to succeed or not, but it really increases the potential for you to hit it and be successful with that. All right. So number one, do you have a plan? So what are some of the types of plans that we need to think about for the upcoming year? Annual budget, of course, for the upcoming year. The financial budget that has all the moving pieces. A staffing plan. We can come up with the revenue number, but if we don't have staffing, if we don't have the plan to recruit, hire, attract, and retain employees, we're going to fall short on that. And that's across the membership within Nexstar, we're finding that is the biggest limiting factor that we've got right now within growth of our businesses is really trying to take advantage of that. So put a lot of careful thought into the staffing aspect of your business. How are we going to achieve these numbers in the upcoming year if we don't have the folks to execute? All right. And don't be afraid to lean on your Nexstar coaches. We've got a recruiting coach. Stefan Bush is a great resource for that. We've got the Nexstar staffing, the Troops to Trades, the Explore the Trades, making sure that you get your names up there, your companies are posted on there, so that if we have a good applicant that gets out of a military base near you and they want to stay in the area, that you're the conduit that helps them find their way to you want the conduit open so they find their way to your business. So that's a great piece of this. Marketing plan. We have to have the calls, we have to have the marketing vehicles that's going to drive those calls to our business so that we can keep all these folks busy and keep us humming along. And so for growth, the marketing plan becomes a very critical piece of that. So don't be afraid to lean your individual marketing coach for that, your strategic partners, if there are pay-per-click programs or any other things that you need to deploy. But a marketing plan for the upcoming year is another crucial part of the strategic planning for the business. And then the one that's near and dear to my heart, of course, is the training plan. So if we get the other moving pieces in place, we've got a budget, we've got a staffing plan, we've got a marketing plan. We're hitting on 7 cylinders. Now, do we have the team trained that can really execute this effectively? So having a comprehensive training plan is really a huge part of this. And so your training accountability coach. If I'm your training accountability coach, please reach out. I'm happy to help you build out a training plan so that our teams are equipped with the processes so that they can succeed and implement your plan. All right. Any questions so far? All right. And I won't be introducing any new tools to you, for some of the attendees we have on this call. A lot of this is things that you have in place already. I just want to dust off our thinking and make sure that we're thinking about 2019 and going into it. All right, so the next step, dream the dream. All right, looking at if you were to look back and tell your story, and we call this dream casting, If you were to dreamcast in December of 2019, looking back at what you accomplished, what you achieved in 2019, what would that look like? What would your revenue be? What would your sold hours be? What would your staffing look like? What would your company culture look like? Don't be afraid to dream the dream. Just and a good way to dreamcast this is just start with a blank piece of paper and just dream for a moment. What do I want my end result of 2019 to look like? You know, so dream the dream. Revenue, conversion rates, average ticket, tech generated leads, high ticket sales, whatever it is that you want to drive for 2019, don't be afraid to take out a blank piece of paper and just let your mind run wild with that for a minute. And this becomes more challenging as we get older. There was an exercise I did as a young man that was a Tony Robbins exercise where you take out a piece of paper and you dream about all the things that you want to be, do, have, achieve, and you just run wild with that for 5 minutes. And when you're young, that's a pretty easy exercise to do because we're full of dreams. I found when I did that later in life, it was a little bit more challenging to fill up a page because we hold ourselves back in our mind with all the reasons why we can't do something. All right. So really resist try to take the harnesses off and really let your mind dream. What is the company what's the story I want to tell in 2019? Dream the dream. All right. All right. Got a question there. All right. Hey, awesome. Thank you. Okay. So let's go on to step 2. Establish where we're going. Okay. Establish where we are first. We have to benchmark where we're at. So we're going to look at our 12-month metrics, rolling 12 months. Okay. What was the story that we've got over the last 12 months? What was our revenue? What was our revenue by department? What were our conversion rates, our tech generated leads? Maybe the closing metrics of our sales folks, our sales force, average ticket, conversion rates. How are we closing tech leads? How are we closing marketed leads? We've got to know where we're at before we know where we're going. So consider staffing, consider the seasonality. We need to look at, if you look back at 2018 and you're benchmarking some fan numbers, but unfortunately you lost some of your heavy hitters, that's going to affect where you go in the upcoming year, right? So we want to make sure that we're looking at all the things now. So step 1, we dreamt the dream, right? We made this vision. Now we're gonna introduce a little bit of reality into this and figure out where we're actually at. What was our average ticket, conversion rate, metrics, revenue, sold hours, sold days, whatever it is that we're tracking. Let's make sure we've got some good numbers. Look at the seasonality, see what your trend is, and hopefully the metrics that we're looking at in November and December look a whole lot better than they did in maybe January and December of next year. And so this is another important element to keep in mind when you're projecting or setting goals for the upcoming year. If we're looking at the whole year, you might not have been as good in January, February, or March as you ended up in October, November, December. It's not always not always the case, but think about this. If we really started hitting on all cylinders with our training plan, if we really attracted some great talent last year, we may hopefully finish our year a lot stronger than we started it. That's the goal anyway, right? So take a look at that. Don't let January, February, March, or first half or first quarter numbers skew where you end up. So you're going to look at the big picture, but you're also going to chunk it down by seasonality, talent, and end of the year results. Okay. Some of the other things we're going to look, we want to project out our income statement for the rest of the calendar year or fiscal year if it doesn't coincide with calendar year. Where are we going to finish? What is our revenue going to look like for the end of the year? Project that out so that we have a good, accurate 12-month estimate of what we're going to finish so that we know what we can build on. And then, of course, we're going to rely upon software reports, coaching and tracking tools, anything that you use inside your business to measure, to get some kind of a gauge on where you're at, right? So take a look at use all the resources that you've got available. All right. Next, get real. Okay, so we had the big dream. Now we've got some reality check there with the actual numbers. Now let's set some goals. Okay, and these need to be SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, timely. Those are all really important factors. We have to set goals that we can measure, right? Because a feel good goal that we really can't measure and definitively say, did we achieve this or not, is not going to help us out, So we got to be specific, very specific in the goals that we're setting. We have to be able to measure them. We have to be able to know, are they achievable? Are they real? Is it a realistic goal? I could say I want to walk on the moon, but you know, that might not be a realistic goal. And what is the timeline associated with these goals? And again, we don't start January 1st and flip a switch. You know, we could get this staffing model, this marketing plan, and all these moving pieces in place, but there's typically going to be a little bit more runway involved in really getting all the cylinders hitting there, right? So, so be realistic about the timeline that we're going to achieve this. You don't just start hitting all these things January 1st. That would be a perfect world if we did. All right. Now, we have a fantastic course in Nexstar called the Business Planning Workshop. And if any of you have been to it, it's a very comprehensive program. And this is not a plug for Business Planning Workshop, but I do want to bring this back into, I see this consistently in Business Planning Workshop. When we go through the forecasting of what we're going to achieve in the upcoming year, it sometimes we get so full of the excitement, the adrenaline, that we have to, as coaches, really kind of pull members back and say, okay, that's a fantastic goal, but might be a little bit aggressive. You might be way out over your skis on that, because we get caught up in the moment. So look back at your projections with a sense of reality. And I don't mean to be a dream killer, but you know, life happens, business happens, staffing changes happen. So let's make a very solid plan. If you're projecting a 50% growth and this all looks good on paper, it you know, might not really come to fruition. We don't want to set ourselves up for failure. So let's be aggressive but smart. Step 4, let's build the plan. So it starts with having an action plan. And I want to share with you a few resources. Okay. So on the Nexstar website, under the category Performance and Goal Setting, we have a number of resources there that you can lean on. So let's go down to accountability, 100-day plans, annual performance reviews. Um, if you're not currently doing annual performance reviews with your folks, that's another key thing to consider in this piece of this. Do we actually review our folks on an annual basis and let them know how they're doing? You know, and now sometimes this might coincide with a merit increase, but it doesn't have to. You got to set the expectation, you know. And there are a lot of folks that will always put their annual performance review hand in hand with getting a raise, and that might not necessarily be the case. So make sure that we set those expectations. And on a side note, as a company, if you have annual performance increases or annual increases, by structuring that, you're a little bit less likely to get the folks that hold you hostage for a raise mid-year or outside of that cycle. So, really defining when do we do our annual reviews and when do we do our annual merit increases around this company, that can help you avoid some of the hostage situations that you find yourself in. Apprentice task certifications. For some of your junior folks, some of the goal setting that we want to set are, what are some of the very specific metrics that you need to achieve, and how can I help you develop those? Call center tracking, coaching. What are the metrics within our call center? Call capture rates, outbound calling, inside sales performance, all those types of things. Let's see. What are we doing with our non-negotiable standards for our team? As businesses grow, the non-negotiable standards, the culture, the things that we allow. It's it's important that we really enforce the standards that we put in place, because this becomes more and more critical as we grow. Um, and so there's some fantastic tools on here. Setting sales expectations, tracking results, SMART goals. Again, all these can be found under the performance and goal setting area on the Nexstar website. Perfect. And for your leadership team, building leaders and developing your management and leadership teams could be a critical piece of this. Are we doing weekly team leader meetings with our leaders? Are we reviewing the Building Leaders series, taking one of those per week? So there's some fantastic resources here that can really help you grow and develop your team. Okay. So now we build out those plans. And again, lean on your Nexstar coaches for all these moving pieces. You know, build a master action plan of all the things that we want to achieve in the upcoming year. That's the action plan. Then we chunk the action plan down. Who do we assign these things to? Who owns the moving pieces of the action plan? Do we know if we achieve the action plan? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Right? So the action plan is that's the blueprint for how we're going to achieve that. And for those of you that have been through business planning workshop, we go through the whole process of inputting the financials, the staffing, the calls, the sold hours. We do all these moving pieces, and then we also build the action plan of how we're going to achieve that. So that's a critical piece of this. So how do we do that? Now we take the action plan and we're going to chunk that down into our individuals' 100-day plans. And again, as an owner or a leader of your business, it doesn't mean that you own all the 100-day plans. You do ultimately own them, but you're not going to execute every one of those. So the important thing is we chunk the action plan down into bite-sized pieces for your team. All right. And again, going back to the Nexstar website, 100-day plans, boom, right there. You've got a section for those. You've got a sample. And if you have any questions about building out 100-day plans, everyone within your business should have their own individual 100-day plan. And if you go to St. Paul and go into our training facility in the break room, you'll notice all of us Nexstar staff have our 100-day plans posted on the wall in there. So we live by these, and it helps keep us focused and on track, and it will for your team too. So building the 100-day plans is an important piece. Marketing plan, get with your marketing coach and develop the marketing plan. If you don't already, it's not too late. These are critical things to build out for the upcoming year. We can't just wish the calls would fall from the sky. We have to have a plan in place that's going to drive the result we want. And part of that plan might even be your cost per lead. Do we know what our cost per lead is on these? And that might even be one of our goals. I want to reduce marketing costs. Well, how am I going to do that? I need to be more efficient at the marketing that I am doing. So we know, in looking at the big 5 items on our P&L, on our income statement, incremental improvements to each one of those big 5s all results in bottom line profitability. So being just a little bit better in every category, can really make a dramatic result when you add up those big 5 things. Okay. Staffing plan. Oops. Having a plan to attract, train, and retain top talent. How do we attract these folks? And it starts with a plan. Do we know how many folks we need to have within the business? And it's very easy to get defeated in this area and just kind of resign ourselves to the fact that there's not a lot of technicians out there, or we can go out there and really aggressively have a plan to get those and be staffed and to have a bench of promotable talent waiting to join our organization. And if you've been on calls with me about that before, probably the simplest way I can share it is devote a portion of every day. Somebody in your business, service managers, whoever owns their departments, divisions, install crews, whatever, devote a portion of every day to reaching out, connecting, keeping conduits open, so that you are the light that they look for when they're making a change. Because there's not a lot of great talent sitting out there at home looking through the wanted ads. Most of the good folks are working for somebody already, or we're going to have to grow our own. But we have to be the beacon so that they know that we're looking and we help them find us. Now we build the budget. All right. What is our budget for the upcoming department, division, each section of our company? Do we have a plan in place? And does everybody know what they own? All right. Great question. So Bob has a question: is the action plan and the 100-day plan the same? And that's a great question. So no, they're not. And I can send you an example of an action plan. I don't want to fumble here and try to pull it up, but in the business planning workshop, we actually have an action plan. Well, I think we're good on time. Let me pull this very quickly. And so when I talk about an action plan, action plan. There we go. And this could be very simple, but an action plan is just what is the action we're going to take? What is specifically, what does that mean? Who owns it? And who else is involved in achieving that? What's the start date that we're going to start that and execute it? And when do we expect to have finished? And then, so when we build out the action plan, we might have a whole list of things here, and they all might be important, but now we need to prioritize those, high, medium, or low. And our natural tendency is to start everything on January 1, but that's not realistic. When you got a lot of fires to put out, you always have to prioritize those and handle the most important thing first. Get that handled, then you move on to the next important thing. And that's a good way to think about executing your action plan. What's the most important thing we need to do right now? First things first, second things never. All right. And then once you get your first thing done, your second thing becomes, your first thing. So we put this on the plan and then prioritize out the date of when we're going to do it. All right. And so what are the specific things? Is there a cost involved in this? Some things will involve cost, and that also includes a budgeting element to this project, right? So if we're going to do a software switch in 2019, that could be a very significant cost for you. So we need to evaluate that too. What's realistic to do this year from a cost standpoint? All right. All right, cool. You got it, Bob. Perfect. So that's the action plan, and I can absolutely share that with you later. Uh, All right. Next, we need to chunk that down into bite-sized pieces. All right. So this would involve individual action plans. Do we have individual action plans for everybody? Performance reviews. Are we doing performance reviews with our team? And as part of that performance review process, you can also, have some really great discussions about what developmental needs that you would like to see in the upcoming year as well, and how can I help you achieve those, right? So the performance reviews play a big part in setting ourselves up for the upcoming year. And establish ownership. We talk about, did we win the day? Everybody in your organization should understand what that means. What does it mean to win the day? Okay. Did we win the day? If you're a CSR, if you're a dispatcher, if you're a technician, if you're the owner, what does it mean to win the day? Okay. So perfect. Establish ownership. All right. So that's just a quick run through. Want to, get thinking. So good question. If we're consistently doing one-on-ones with our team, should we still do performance reviews? Yeah, great question. And absolutely, because it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different conversation, and folks like to know how they're doing, and the weekly one-on-ones are a very important piece of that. Letting them know in real time how we're doing, coaching them, motivating them, correcting them. Think of the performance review as more of an overview, where we're addressing, hey, how did you do as a year? And we're really looking at this a little bit more strategically as to where we want to take this in the upcoming year. So the annual performance review is a great part of this. And I want to show you on the next our site here where that lives. Performance summary, annual performance reviews. So if you go on the performance and goal setting section, go down to the bottom, because The things that you see below the headings are the most common, most frequently used things. So these are the things that our members are hitting the most. And when you see annual performance reviews, there's some really great tools there. There's a setup by Jody Peter that talks a little about the importance of it, and then you've got the resources to the right side. So it talks a little bit about the review process, the timeline, the flow chart, how to execute that, and then you've actually got the forms for doing performance reviews for your managers and doing performance reviews for your teams, non-management members. So great resources there on the Nexstar site. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? Give you just a moment there. All right, perfect. We'll go ahead and wrap this up, but if you do have follow-up questions for me, don't be afraid, pop me an email and we'll fit in a quick call. Our next tap in is going to be Friday. These are always on Friday mornings, so Friday, January 11th. And we're going to resume our TAP series of the steps of the training accountability process. And so the next one is, what are the metrics that you're tracking? And again, this is geared more for service management. What are the metrics you're tracking? So we're going to talk about conversion rate, average ticket KPIs, tech-generated leads, all those fun types of things. All right. So thank you so much for your time this morning. Thanks for joining me, and have a fantastic weekend. Bye now.